In every corner of America, there are stories of resilience, innovation, and the unwavering spirit of community. Stories of people and places transformed by the power of connection, collaboration, and a shared vision for a better future. This is the Community Effect, brought to you by NeighborWorks America.
Welcome to the Community Effect, a podcast by NeighborWorks America. I'm your host, Marietta Rodriguez. In each episode, we share stories of hope, transformation, and the power of place. How strong partnerships and innovative ideas are helping communities thrive. Today, we're joined by someone whose leadership has redefined the way philanthropy and finance come together to create lasting change. Brandee McHale is the head of community investing and development at Citi and the president of the Citi Foundation. With more than 30 years of finance and philanthropy, Brandee has been at the forefront of efforts to expand economic opportunity, financial inclusion, and community development across the country. Brandee, I'm so excited to have you join us. Welcome to the Community Effect.
Thank you so much, Marietta. I'm thrilled to be here with you, and I appreciate that very kind and generous introduction. I'm just as excited to be here with you today as well.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a few questions, obviously, to start our conversation here. This year marks the 30th anniversary of Citi Foundation. Such a major milestone. Congratulations. Looking back on the investment Citi Foundation has made, what stands out to you about how the foundation has evolved through different economic cycles, crises, moments of recovery? What would you say?
Well, let me first say, I can't believe it's our 30th anniversary and that I've actually am here for the 30th anniversary. I was here on day one and I'm still here, and it's been an incredible journey. It's been, on one hand, a very long time, and on the other hand, I'm amazed at how quickly that time has gone by. And the one thing that has been a constant throughout these 3 decades is our unwavering commitment, what we refer to as our North Star, which is to promote economic progress and work to improve the lives of people in low-income communities around the world. How that mission gets executed has needed to evolve and to adapt. One of the things that I think is a hallmark for us here, and frankly, we didn't teach it to ourselves, we actually learned by watching our grantees in action, is we see it is critical to be able to continually listen, to be in learning mode, to be willing to adapt to ever-changing needs to meet the moment. And so while we continue to be focused on that same economic opportunity North Star, we've also had times where we've needed to stop, not be on autopilot, respond to crisis moments, and then also understand how did our work need to change fundamentally as we moved into a period of economic volatility. So we've been a constant community development funder. We've also been a crisis response funder. And now we see ourselves as a funder that's trying to help communities navigate economic volatility.
I want to push on something that you said and ask you, about the approach investing. How important is scale when you're looking at opportunities? Because you probably get inundated with all sorts of opportunities, but how important is scaling something? And not everything is right for scale. Sometimes it's testing something. But let's talk about scale a little bit. How critical is that?
Yeah, you hear that a lot in the foundation world. That is one of our objectives. I actually this is my own personal point of view. I think we place too much emphasis on scale at the philanthropic stage. The whole point of philanthropic dollars is they should be the dollars where you can take the most risk. They're the dollars that should seed new ideas. And if we're holding those ideas up to some kind of litmus test of scale, I think we're automatically creating a narrow funnel, and we're already stopping the possibility of what could be. So I don't like to think about scale at the early stage, at the philanthropic stage, but there is a continuum of capital. And I think that as you get along that continuum and you move from philanthropic dollars, impact investing dollars, and then into market based dollars, that's where you really want to begin to see, can this idea scale? And in part, it's because the size of the capital to be deployed has to be at a certain amount based on each stage. It's the same amount. The bank isn't going to make a loan for one single unit in a building. You want to look to provide capital to finance a large number of units. It doesn't make any sense. So you got to think about your sources and uses in that space. And so that's where I think scale, we bring it into the conversation sometimes too early. On the other hand, I want to also keep it real and say there are times where when you have scarce resources, it's not just financial capital, but also human capital. You got to make tough choices. And if it's a nice to do boutique effort, I don't think we live in a world right now where we have the luxury where we can afford that. So I think you can use it to make some tough choices.
I think that's fair. And what I'm hearing from you is there's a balance. There's a place for it, but you have to also think about critical resources and how to deploy them. Earlier, you spoke about the role you play on being an influencer across the bank and in the community, and the way you show up as an employer, as a funder. At NeighborWorks, we often talk about the power of partnership, and the power of partnership being a multiplier. And it's not just about collaboration and having nice conversations, but it's about true alignment. And I'd be curious, from your view, how do financial institutions like Citi see their role in community investment? And how does that multiply or complement or build alignment with what nonprofits and community development organizations also bring to the table?
It's a really interesting question. I've been thinking about this idea of collaboration and partnership now for a while. And it sort of dawned on me that we used to think that leadership was synonymous with exclusivity, that we wanted to have a leadership role because we wanted to own something and we wanted to be identified with something. And so we wanted to be the big player in a space. And then my thinking began to evolve around this idea of influence, to say, no, what we want to do is be an influencer, because no one institution can do it alone, and help bring others to the table. But I think there's something in the middle of those two ideas. And for me, it's the idea of being willing to be a first mover. And I think some of the best partnerships and collaborations are when both entities are comfortable at equal levels, saying we're willing to be a first mover and then make space for others to join in at the table, leave our egos at the door, and also be willing to say, how does this evolve?
I think that's a very interesting frame about the first mover. When two entities, like a financial institution as big as Citi and, for example, a nonprofit, come together to be that first mover, how would you describe an effective partnership? Because you talked a little bit about it. You have to leave your ego at the door, but you have to leave room at the table for others. What are other hallmarks of the ideal partnership when you're all aligned around creating some impact?
Yeah. Well, let me just say, in my mind, NeighborWorks has always stood as the model and an originator in the community development public-private partnership model space. You are the original public-private partnership leader. From day one, you've always thought about, how do we bring together community-based entities, private sector entities, public sector entities, so that the sum is greater than the parts. So thank you for all that NeighborWorks does and has led the way for many of us. I think the most critical thing I've taken away, and look, I've been involved in a lot of projects that were fantastic ideas. They were sometimes flawed in execution, and they were really flawed in the wind down process. So I think the first thing is to set some sort of guidelines and parameters for when we're going to check in and say, is this working? Why not? And what is the moment where we both make a decision? Maybe our initial assumptions weren't correct. I think it's sort of like sometimes you see two people who were dating. It took them longer to break up than it did for them to actually get together and in the first place. That's, I think, a hallmark sometimes of the partnerships between nonprofits and foundations and the private sector. So one is that kind of just going into it knowing not everything is going to be a lifelong marriage. I think the other thing is we have to really understand where each other is coming from. Foundations should not be upset, nor should we should really understand. I say every time I pick up the phone, Marietta, over the years to call you to ask you something, that phone call's technically not free. Your time, the time of your team, even the ideation time that you spend developing proposals and ideas, those things require funding in order to have the capacity to deliver through the ideation phase. So I think understanding what each entity needs, you need support at the ideation phase. We should be willing to give that. We shouldn't expect you to do that for free. The flip side is that I think many organizations who do have to fundraise have an assumption that there are more dollars available than there are. And I can guarantee you we get far many more requests than we can deliver upon. It is not easy to pick and choose. And we feel, I think foundation program officers in particular, you have a responsibility to be a steward of those funds. And there are a lot of different things to balance. I think, again, if you're on the looking for the funding side, recognizing what your donor needs, if you're a donor, recognizing what the nonprofit needs. And then finally, I'll just say when you bring in a public sector player, understand that they have a whole set of operating rules that are very different than what either of us on the for-profit or nonprofit side work with. So I think it's just understanding the context and that these need to be, it's like a three-legged stool. And you have to understand what, the size of each of that leg of that stool and make sure that it's all in balance.
Those are some great elements to think about when forming a new partnership or even revisiting an existing partnership. That's really helpful. There's such a legacy of great programs that the Citi Foundation has invested in over the last 30 years. Been behind some incredible programs, including Community Progress Makers, the Global Innovation Challenge, and now the Community Finance Initiative. And these have really emerged and become models for how funders can move ideas from what you were just describing, sort of pilot innovation to scale. Are there other lessons learned as you stood those up and made those investments that you want to carry through into the next 30 years of the foundation?
Yeah, I think that one of the sort of big milestone moments we have had here at the Citi Foundation was a few years ago. We said we can't just focus on what we fund. And thank you, by the way, for highlighting each one of those initiatives. Each one of these are programs that we've designed and curated and identified grantees to execute and carry out work under those flagship initiatives. But it's not just what we're funding. That matters a lot. I don't want to mislead you. We want to make sure that our dollars are supporting organizations that are making a difference in the lives of real people and real places. So that's the what. But I think we've really focused on the how. And we've tried to level the playing field in the nonprofit and foundation space, and that each one of these programs is operated and executed through an open source RFP model, where we put out an open call for ideas and then cull through those ideas. A question I always get is you can sometimes our Global Innovation Challenge, for example, we just did a round that was focused on youth employment. What are new ways that we can connect young people to jobs in a vastly different economy than what we faced growing up? And I said, well, we got thousands of applications. We made 50 grants. But first question I get was, aren't there several thousand people that are angry and upset that they didn't get an award? And I say, it's that there's a difference between being disappointed and being frustrated because you never got a chance. You never got a chance to get your foot in the door. And if we continue to drive philanthropy based on a who knows who strategy, we're trying to break that model and say we want to open up the doors, we want to let new voices in, and I'll call them vintage voices, Marietta, organizations we've worked with for a long time. So we try to have a mix in our portfolio of new partners, existing partners that we've evolved with over the decades. It has helped us as grant makers to meet new individuals. And I think it has reminded us that we have an obligation to not just fund good programs, but to also support the whole ecosystem of entities to say, let's continue to generate new ideas because those ideas are going to be listened to.
I think it's so helpful for me, and I'm sure many of our listeners, to hear about your approach and the intentionality and thoughtfulness that you take in giving. I'm going to push on that a little bit further. NeighborWorks was so fortunate. Citi Foundation was one of the early partners to NeighborWorks on our financial capability work. And I know it's something that we're very proud of. I think you are as well. What drew you to that investment, and how did you see that investment in financial capability really evolving as the field changed?
This is one of my favorite initiatives as well, so I'm so happy that you brought it up. See, there's a difference between invention and innovation. And sometimes I think of invention as like something brand new that nobody ever imagined. And innovation, sometimes you can drive innovation, new solutions to longstanding challenges with a small, sort of a tweak of something existing. And that is exactly what we did with the financial capability demonstration project that we worked on over a decade ago together. NeighborWorks already had the strongest and most accomplished network of homeownership counselors and a trust in local communities. And we said, frankly, we were really in the middle of the financial crisis where people were struggling financially. They had seen a depletion of wealth, but there was really a trust gap that I don't think had ever existed before. And we said, what if we can build on that trust that NeighborWorks already has with households and take their trusted homeownership counselors and just help broaden their role to be full financial coaches? We weren't standing up something brand new. We were taking what existed and saying, how do we make it work even more powerfully? And it wasn't just financial counseling. I have a problem. I need a solution. We went beyond that and said, let's use a coaching framework and a financial health framework and say, we don't just want to see people at one point in their financial life cycle. Let's build a relationship with them and have them think about their full financial life cycle and let them know that we're here for them. So I think, to me, it's the perfect example of taking what exists, building upon it, and then really understanding how that is actually going to help the households we serve even more.
I would agree. The financial coaching frame was transformative because up until that point, most of the interaction with housing counseling was, I have a problem, a credit issue, or I want to get into a house, or I need to become eligible for this down payment program. It was all around getting you to a certain point. Where the coaching approach was really, how do we build this long term? what are the customers' goals and how can we support it? It was really transformative. So I think we're still feeling the impact of that investment and that work. So thank you. Your point about taking something that existed, tweaking it, and creating more impact was a good one. I wonder if you had an example, though, of something that you all invested in that started pretty small, but grew to greater scale. But for that little first investment, it wouldn't have grown.
Yeah. I think actually I'm really proud of the fact that we have several of those examples. And I will just say what's a hallmark of each one of these examples is that it's not something that we did on our own. It's something that the reason why it was successful was because others came to the table as well. Let's just stick on the financial coaching, financial capability model. I'm very proud of the way that we have helped to seed programs around the country that moved from traditional financial literacy, teaching people what they should know, to actually working with them to develop the behaviors and the capabilities and walk them through a real-time experience of how to put that knowledge into action. So that's one example. Another area is thinking about affordable housing. We used to just think about housing as the physical place, but bringing together and recognizing that it's about place and people. I think that's also been a hallmark of our effort to say, how do we not only make sure that there is more affordable housing, but that there actually are supportive services so people in that housing can move up the economic ladder. Our work on youth and connecting young people to jobs became very clear to us that what people used to call the soft skills are actually the power skills today. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done in that space in particular, because we also really hit upon the power of belief in oneself. And I think what we found is that when young people begin to picture themselves as having a future, and then they believe that they have the ability to get there, that to me is the heart of community development. And I think that is the biggest success that all of our collective institutions have had, which is to inspire hope, create those examples of hope that then actually stand as beacons for others.
Well said and inspiring. And you have such an incredible body of investment. Congratulations and thank you all at the same time. I'd like to sort of pivot now to think about the future. And there's so much uncertainty right now. There's a lot of things that are changing, particularly in communities and in the community development field. I'm curious, looking into the next decade, where do you see the greatest opportunities for seeding or scaling innovation in the community development field?
Well, we're definitely living in a moment, like we've never experienced before. But I think people talk a lot about the headwinds that we may be facing in community development. Do believe we have some tailwinds, and we need to keep reminding ourselves of that. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, certainly 20, 25 years ago, there were no conversations about income and wealth gaps. There was a lack of knowledge and understanding about how households were impacted and coping on a day-to-day basis. I think that these are issues that are now front and center. I think that the focus on, we've got really powerful examples of how we've had seen large urban centers decline and be reinvested in and reinvent themselves. I think we're seeing this on the rural side as well, which we've tried for a very long time in the community development space to make sure that community development was included, rural and urban efforts. So I think that there's more awareness and a support and an idea for how do we help give people the tools that they need in order to continue to advance. Now, that being said, there's a lot of disruption that's happening. I don't think we fully have ever experienced a disruptor like we have seen with the introduction of AI. And disruptor, by the way, is not always bad, but the take up of AI and how quickly it is changing the workplace, even our personal lives. A year ago, I was like, oh, this AI thing, I wonder what that is. And now look at us. We're thinking about what does it mean for our institutions. I think that we have an opportunity in community development to leverage AI to help us work faster, to be more efficient, for us to make smarter choices. Uh, so that's one thing. I do think our fields will be very different. I don't think it will ever replace, though, the need for the really human centric approach that people who make a career in community development bring to this work. And I want to say I think that has always been, and what has drawn me personally to the community development field was the love of people and of places and of families. And so I'm hoping that the technology is actually going to free us up from some of the more mundane tasks to do more of that human centric work. So I think that's another tailwind I'm super excited about. And then, finally, I'll just say the concept of public private partnerships now feels a little bit like old news. And I think that's a sign of success for us. 30 years ago, it was a shiny new object. I think now that we've seen this, that this is this is a norm. This is a way you have to do business. I think that's good for us. We don't have to spend time selling that idea and why we should continue to work together. So I know there's a lot of noise in the system. I view the moment we're living in as a very turbulent airplane ride. But I'm really excited that I'm on the airplane and I know it's going to land in a place where I want us to be. So we just have to get through the little bumpy part, but just buckle in. It's going to be okay.
I love that picture about, we're on a plane, but we're going someplace great, even though it's a little bumpy. And I appreciate you acknowledging that there are headwinds in this work, because there just are, and they feel like they're at us every day. But I so appreciate the way you framed that we have some tailwinds as well that are at our backs. I appreciate also the recognition of what artificial intelligence could bring us and how it could make our jobs easier. I find, and this is a little simplistic, admittedly, but people are in a couple of camps, like curious about AI, really worried about AI and the George Orwell of it all. I wonder if you have experienced some hesitancy and risk aversion to AI. I certainly have. I think it's worth us investigating in, and I'm willing to take a little risk to learn more about how it can make our jobs easier. But I wonder what your experience has been, because like you, I think there's some real potential there that we shouldn't be afraid of.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say, first and foremost, I'm a member of my community. I'm a parent. I think about what the world is, how it's changing so rapidly, what this is going to look like for my kids who are now all young adults. And I worry that they may have been prepared for a world that is changing so quickly. I think one of the things I want to just make sure that we don't lose sight of is that it's not just what the AI is. I think the disruption of AI is enabling us to be more versatile and more open to change and doing things differently. And that's a little bit how I see AI. I don't see it as taking something away. I do see it. I mean, we've begun using it here in the bank, again, very rapidly over the past year. We all go to Google and type something into Google, right? So we're already using technology. We're just going to start to use better technology that can be even more powerful. I don't have to use Google to find now the sources I want to read. The AI can pull it all together and summarize it for me, and it makes it it takes it one step further. So I do have these worries about how the world is changing so rapidly, but it's a little bit for me like we're learning new skills, we're evolving, and we're getting better at learning new ways of doing things. So, the jury is out. I don't want to paint a completely rosy picture and pretend that it doesn't feel uncomfortable, that the unknown doesn't seem scary in some way. But I also don't want us to forget that these are not tools to control us. These are tools that are really designed to make us go faster. And if there is one thing that anybody listening to our discussion today that I would hope is that we need to keep going faster in the community development space. We have great ideas, we have proven strategies. It's not just that we need to scale those proven strategies, we also just need to bring them to life more quickly. And I hope these tools will do that.
Yeah, I think I share that, and I appreciate your recognition of the public-private partnership is the way of work now. We don't have to sell that. It feels like sometimes we still do, but I appreciate you saying, like, we know that this is a good way and a solid way of approaching our work, and I think that's a huge lesson from the last couple of decades or so. So thank you for that. I just want to ask you a few more things. As you think about the last 30 years and the future, what are things that you would hope we don't forget, that we carry into the future? Those lessons, those critical elements, what can we not afford to forget?
I think we cannot afford to forget that when we disinvest, it actually has an economic impact on us all. I think that we cannot afford to forget that fundamentally that progress will continue and that we need to have that balance. We need to make sure that it's progress for all and that we are raising up and highlighting those who may be at risk of being left behind and making sure that we are designing interventions and strategies to bring everybody along. I think that is different than a rising tide lifts all boats. Okay, I think making sure that no one is left behind is different than assuming, well, if everything rises, everybody will be okay. No, we know now that's not necessarily going to be the case. The other thing I would say is that there are people in real crisis in communities right now. There are people who are recovering from things that were completely out of their control over natural disasters. There are people who are being affected by geopolitical politics. I don't think that we ever thought about that connection in local communities before, how geopolitics affects local communities the way that they have. And we also just have a crisis moment where there are people who are still going to bed at night without a home, without a roof over their head. Far too many children don't have three meals a day. And, we're continuing to see an explosion of homelessness on our streets. There are many other crisis moments as well. And I just want to be sure that we don't forget that there are institutions that are working on systemic solutions and scaling those solutions. And it's really important that we also have organizations who are a safety net and putting a hand out to others who are in need. I don't think one is better than the other. I know I spent a lot of my career thinking and working with entities who were working on the solution side. And I want to be sure that we always balance that with making sure that we are supporting organizations who are also there right now today for somebody who is in real physical or emotional need.
I think that's such an important point because so often, and it's incredibly powerful as a financial institution and as a funder that you recognize that, because I feel like As nonprofits and community development organizations, there's a pressure to always bring you the shiny new idea to fund, when in reality, the core business also needs funding. We can do innovation so long as the core business is also supported. They're sometimes mutually exclusive, and so we need to make sure both have funding. And so I really appreciate that notion that there's a responsibility to pay attention to both things. Brandee, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's inspiring to hear how you and the Citi Foundation continues to lead with both vision, purpose, heart, and that you're not just investing in programs, but you're investing in people, and you're thinking about community impact and what's the potential to transform not only individuals and communities, but entire systems. Brandee, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's inspiring to hear how you and the Citi Foundation continues to lead with both vision, purpose, heart, and that you're not just investing in programs, but you're investing in people, and you're thinking about community impact and what's the potential to transform not only individuals and communities, but entire systems.
Well, I appreciate that you invited me to spend some time with you today and to have this conversation. Even just these questions have sparked my own thinking. So I appreciate everything that I've taken away from it, and I hope that others listening will take something as well.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning into the Community Effect. Be sure to follow NeighborWorks America wherever you listen to podcasts for more stories of innovation, partnership, and community impact. I'm Marietta Rodriguez. Until next time, stay connected and keep building the Community Effect.
This is the Community Effect, brought to you by NeighborWorks America.